Hello, and thank you for joining me for this edition of the Calvin Chronicles. 2022 marks 80 years since American citizens and legal residents of Japanese descent were forced to move to relocation centers during World War II. In this video, we'll explore how this happened and what they experienced by visiting the site of a former relocation center. Be sure to watch to the end for additional resources and to learn of some familiar names who experienced life in these relocation centers.
Trip in Southeast Asia.
On February 19, 1942, shortly after the United States was thrust into World War II by the Japanese naval attack on Pearl Harbor, President Franklin D Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066. This document ordered the forced removal of approximately 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry from their homes on the West Coast. Families had 7 days or less to sell their possessions, including farms and businesses, usually for less than fair value, and report to be transported to relocation centers in remote areas of the U.S., surrounded by barbed wire and military armed guards. Similar actions were also implemented in Canada. During a trip through Colorado, I visited the site of one relocation center where over 7,000 Japanese Americans and legal Japanese immigrants were relocated. A nearby museum also contains artifacts donated by former detainees at the relocation center. The Amache Relocation Center, located on the outskirts of the small town of Grenada, near the eastern border of the state, is named after the daughter of a Cheyenne chief who married a local rancher in the county in the 1800s. Amache once consisted of 30 blocks, each containing 12 barracks. Within each block was a mess hall and recreation building. As there was no plumbing in the barracks buildings, each block had a single building that contained a laundry area, toilets, and showers that had no dividers or doors. Also on site was a motor pool, hospital, a school, and a military police office. A barracks housed 6 families. Each family had a single room for up to 7 people, measuring up to 20 by 24 feet, or about the size of a typical 2-car garage. Furnishings consisted of cots, a wood or coal-burning stove, and a single bare light bulb. At the museum, you can see a mock-up of a family unit. Over time, many families got creative to create more space, comfort, and privacy. While most of the structures are now gone, as the site was declared surplus and buildings were sold and either moved to other locations for housing or schools after the war, there is still plenty to see on the site. The original roads remain, and you can drive through the site accompanied by a self-guided audio tour and visual markers. Through the grass, you can still find all of the concrete foundations. Also, most trees on site were planted by the detainees themselves. In efforts to provide a more interpretive experience, replicas of the barracks have been built. In 2017, a replica was built of a barracks building. A recreation building was moved back to its original location in 2018 and is being restored. The number and letter combinations on each building were like street addresses. In 2010, the original water tower was donated by the family that purchased it after Amache closed. It was restored in 2014 and stands in its original location. Also nearby is one of the 8 guard towers, which was restored. In other areas of Amache, marker signs point out what used to be at a given location. You can see where the high school was, the athletic field, and the hospital. At the museum, 2 miles away from the relocation camp, there are numerous displays collected from former detainees and other sources. There is information about daily life and exhibits including artwork created by detainees during incarceration. While work was not mandatory, many detainees did engage in agriculture and other tasks. Eventually, many were allowed to attend colleges or work outside of the relocation centers, but were still excluded from the Western United States. This required completing a 28-part loyalty questionnaire, a source of controversy because the process presumed guilt without due process. The displays from school activities and other social events are evidence that the detainees made every attempt to create a normal life, even though they were surrounded behind barbed wire. The museum also has information on the hundreds of Nisei, or second-generation Japanese Americans from Amache, who volunteered to serve in the U.S. military while their families remained incarcerated. Many others were drafted. Most Nisei served in the segregated 442nd Regimental Combat Team, the most highly decorated unit for its size and length of service in U.S. military history. Their best-known campaign was rescuing the surrounded Texas 36th Infantry Division in France. The 442nd was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal in 2010. A replica of this medal is located at the Amache Museum. The names of all Amache detainees who served in the U.S. military during the war are listed on an honor roll near the entrance to the relocation center. One Amache detainee, Army Private First Class Kiyoshi Marinaga was killed in action, saving his soldiers from enemy fire in Italy. In 2000, he was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions. His name is included on a memorial within the cemetery, along with 30 other Amache detainees who served and lost their lives during combat. The cemetery was for all detainees who died at Amache. Of the 120 who died between 1942 and 1945, all but 9 grave sites were relocated after Amache closed. At the end of 1944, it was announced that all relocation centers would close by the end of 1945. Released detainees had to start over, as they lost approximately $400 million in property. Despite the injustices of incarceration, many detainees moved on to start notable careers in art, science, business, politics, entertainment, and other fields. Actors Pat Morita and George Takei spent parts of their childhood in relocation centers in Arkansas, Arizona, and California. Other notable detainees include Norman Mineta, the first Japanese American elected to Congress in the lower 48 states, and was a cabinet member in the administrations of Presidents Bill Clinton and George W. Bush. Iwao Takamoto was an animator, character designer, and Hollywood executive. He was responsible for characters that you may recognize, including Scooby-Doo, produced The Addams Family, and directed Charlotte's Web. No persons of Japanese ancestry were convicted of serious acts of sabotage or espionage. In 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act of 1988 into law. This was an official apology for the relocation centers. The law also authorized payment of $20,000 to each living former detainee. Amache was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1994 and designated a National Historic Landmark in 2006. Efforts are in process for congressional approval to bring the area under the National Park Service. This will create new funding for restoration efforts and ensure that Amache is always remembered. I hope you found this video informational. I appreciate you taking time to follow me on my travel journey to explore history in person. I'll see you in the next video, and until then, take care and keep exploring.